I apologize for that. I'm Larry Whittig. I'd like to call the State Board of Vocational Education. First order of the agenda is the minutes. You've all had an opportunity to review the minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Roll call, Stephanie.
Mr. Agris?
Here.
Dr. Barker? Mr. Bates?
Here.
Ms. Beetlestone? Ms. Clark? Representative Clymer?
Present.
Ms. Davis?
Here.
Senator Dinniman?
Here.
Ms. Dungy Glenn?
Here.
Senator Fulmer? Mr. Grandin? Mr. Grover? Mr. Hallett? Honorable Lolly Green? Dr. Michaelini?
Here.
Mr. Perry?
Here.
Ms. Phillips? Mr. Reynolds?
Here.
Representative Roebuck? Dr. Sheehan?
Here.
Mr. Sheehan? Ms. Farmer White?
Here.
Dr. Williams? Mr. Whittig?
Here. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Now we're at the point of approving the minutes of the prior meeting. You've all had an opportunity to review them. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept. Second. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. We'll now proceed to the report of the Bureau Director for Career and Technical Education, Dr. Lee Burkett.
Good morning. You do have a copy of the full report in your packet, and I do want to mention that we have in that report highlighted some of the activities regarding the Perkins regulation, including the program of study and the articulation agreement efforts. We've also highlighted an activity that we continue to pursue in regard to industry certification opportunities for the students. And we're highlighting 2 of the career and technical student organizations along with the accreditation activities that have occurred since the last board meeting. With that, I'll stop and see if you have any questions on those activities.
Any questions? Is that it? Thank you, Lee. Thank you. There are no action items. Are there anyone who wants to address the State Board of Vocational Education this morning? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second? Made second. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We will move directly into the State Board of Education. I'd like to call to order the 316th meeting of the Pennsylvania State Board of Education. Again, our first order of business is to pass the minutes, or are there any additions or corrections to the July 10th minutes of the meeting? Hearing none, I'll accept the motion to accept. Is there a second?
Second.
Any second? Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The Acting Secretary Dumarescu will give her report a little later in the agenda. For now, we will move directly to the Special Committee on Porter Township Initiative. Wendy Beetlestone chaired that committee. I have to do a plug here, and I told Wendy last night. I went to both of these hearings, and I'm not doing a Jim Barker, hey, everybody's great, but I got to tell you that if anybody conducted themselves in terms of a judge, it was Wendy. She kept all the balls in the air. It was under adverse conditions, I might add, because the room was filled with people that were very emotional on both sides. And she did just an extraordinary job of gathering data and being objective. And really, I thank you for doing that. And I know that it was a heavy lift. So.
Thank you, Larry, for that vote of confidence. And that does not mean that the next time one of these comes around, I get to chair. It's time for someone else. What I'd like to do is take you through the process and how we got here today, and then walk you through the recommendation made by the committee and why we made that recommendation. To start with the process, on July 2nd, 2012, the State Board received a certified copy of a decree of the Court of Common Pleas of Pike County creating the Porter Township Initiative. I'm going to refer to that as PTI during my discussion. The purpose of PTI was an independent school district which had the sole purpose of its transfer from East Stroudsburg Area School District to the Waltham Area School District. The State Board had designated a committee consisting of Kirk Hallett, Molly Phipps, and myself to conduct appropriate proceedings to determine whether or not that transfer should take place. We, in fact, conducted a public hearing on May 16th and 17th, 2013 at the East Stroudsburg High School, and we heard evidence from a wide variety of people, including members of the public, administrators, and parents, and also school children. The parties have stipulated to certain portions of the record which are incorporated into the record, and they also submitted expert reports. In coming up with our recommendation, we reviewed all of the evidence. We determined that the best way of really ensuring that we reached a result which arose directly from the evidence that we had heard was to put the evidence into issue buckets. And we came up with several of these issue buckets. I'm going to tell you what those issue buckets are, and then I'll put all the information into those issue buckets to explain why we came up with our recommendation. The issue buckets were property taxes, the community of Hemlock Farms, the quality of education, school safety, and that fell into two elements, weather and school campus safety, diversity, and curriculum. So when making our decision, we are charged with looking at all of the evidence. In property taxes, East Stroudsburg presented compelling evidence that one of the true motivating factors for pursuing the transfer was PTI's desire to reduce property taxes. If the PTI transfer were approved, Porter Township property taxes would be essentially cut in half. PTI, however, contends that lower property taxes were merely an ancillary benefit of the transfer and not a primary goal or concern of PTI. Having reviewed the evidence, we determined, with respect to the property tax issue, that East Stroudsburg had given proper notice and consideration to residents of Porter Township when it planned and developed an additional campus. East Stroudsburg's educational programs and facilities would be negatively impacted if it was to lose Porter Township property tax revenue, and reducing property taxes appears to be as much a motivating factor for the transfer as any of the educational factors identified by PTI. With respect to the issue bucket community of Hemlock Farms, the vast majority of Porter Township residents supported the transfer reside in the residential community of Hemlock Farms. Hemlock Farms is a private residential community. It's the single largest community in Porter Township. In essence, it has its own public safety function. It has a wide variety of community activities, and it contends that there are negative social and community impacts associated with the Hemlock Farms children having to go to a variety of different school districts. Much, if not all, of PTI's evidence, socialization concerning the Hemlock Farms consisted of purely anecdotal evidence. Without any objective evidence to provide support for PTI's argument, the committee had a difficult time assessing the proper weight to give the testimony. For its part, East Stroudsburg countered PTI with its own set of anecdotes, again, very difficult to determine the import of it on an objective basis. But they did focus on the PTI's argument that it had different rural characteristics than East Stroudsburg. East Stroudsburg provided objective evidence that divisions of the type found in the Hemlock Farms community are very common within the region, and the school districts at issue in this case are in fact classified both as rural in nature. It was also difficult for the community to reconcile some of PTI's positions when on the one hand it extolled the virtue of living in an isolated and rural area, but then turned around and on the other hand pointed to difficulties of interacting with parents and other members of the community due to Highlock Farms isolation. Taking this all into account, the committee concluded that the residents of PTI chose to buy property in East Stroudsburg. Those residents were or should have been aware of the compromises this decision entailed, or compromises they thought it entailed when they purchased their homes with respect to the education of their children. Thus, the committee found that PTI's anecdotal evidence based on socialization issues was unpersuasive and an insufficient basis to justify the transfer. In comparing the quality of education arguments made by the parties, PTI utilized two methods to create a side-by-side comparison of Wallenpaupack and East Stroudsburg. In essence, they looked at the statewide PSSA testing and also AYP progress measures. In analyzing that data, they did not provide anyone whose job it is to understand the data. They provided the analysis of layfolk, parents, and other interested parties who supported the transfer, but who had no professional experience or first-hand knowledge in this area. As a result, it became clear across examination that none of these witnesses were able to explain in-depth or answer detailed questions regarding the particulars of PSSA testing or AYP numbers. East Stroudsburg counted with credible testimony from its superintendent and its administrative services director and its business manager, all of whom are professionals currently working in the field in which they were testifying. They described PSSA testing as an important but not a coherent way to measure the quality of the school's education in a one-to-one comparison of school districts. And the superintendent testified that while the PSSA is certainly helpful to her as an executive administrator within the district, it is in fact only one piece of a total picture. East Stroudsburg also brought in data with respect to PVAS. That is a publicly available metric and addresses the growth of an individual school and the growth children in that school make from the moment they come into the school until they leave the school. East Stroudsburg has a very high transience rate, meaning that on average nearly 1,000 total students either leave or come into the district. Thus, it is very difficult to measure performance from year to year, and PVAS is one effective way to measure those students who have stayed in the district. The superintendent testified that examining the PVAS statistics demonstrate that East Stroudsburg has shown student growth since entering the district, particularly in the elementary school context. PTI did not utilize PVAS in its school analysis. Accordingly, we gave credence to East Stroudsburg. With respect to school safety, on the transportation front, PTI cited transportation difficulties that resulted from weather in Porter Township as a significant contributor to student safety. According to parents for PTI, Porter Township has a special weather system that is very questionable and is different from the weather system in East Stroudsburg, which is lower down the mountain. PTI contended that there have been times when it is both snowing and unsafe in Porter Township, yet school has opened in East Stroudsburg because the weather was not as bad there. East Stroudsburg took this testimony, which again was anecdotal, and addressed it in its particulars. The superintendent described how she worked with school districts across the area to determine what the weather was at all elevations in the mountains and in the valleys. And in the instances of bad weather, she also talked to school police patrols through the night to gather information and report on current weather conditions throughout the area. Next, East Stroudsburg submitted documents from local weather stations comparing the last year of weather averages for the weather stations closest to East Stroudsburg and the weather station closest to Wallenpaupack and the weather station closest to the East Stroudsburg North Campus. While the information is of limited value because it was only 1 year, it nevertheless indicated that the precipitation issue was not something that was objectively of concern. Upon consideration of this and other evidence on the weather issue, the committee found that East Stroudsburg demonstrated that the process it uses to determine whether to delay or cancel school is reasonable. Further, PTI failed to demonstrate any negative impact on student safety as it failed to introduce any empirical evidence to demonstrate that PTI's weather is substantially different than East Stroudsburg. With respect to school campus safety, PTI again submitted a lot of anecdotal evidence about concerns of parents and students about safety at East Stroudsburg. East Stroudsburg submitted very detailed reports about the activity, reports at East Stroudsburg, and compared them to reports from Popak. What came out of that was, in essence, that none of these schools are on the dangerous list of PDE, and in fact, all of them are schools that are relatively safe, and we really couldn't make a determination that one was safer over the other. East Stroudsburg focused on the issue of diversity. PTI did not respond at all to those issues. East Stroudsburg contended that the racial composition of Porter Township and the PTI students more closely resembles, PTI contended that the racial composition of PTI students more closely resembled Wallenpaupack than East Stroudsburg. Certainly, East Stroudsburg said that its student base was more diverse, and it also stated that it took great pride in its diversity and noted that it was blessed with such diversity. It intended that a diverse learning environment provides many benefits to the student population, including a free exchange of ideas and experiences, a decrease of racial tensions and prejudice, and long-term benefits like continual diversity and civic management. With respect to curriculum, there was a great deal of comparison of courses that were available at East Stroudsburg and courses that were available at Wallenpaupack. The evidence submitted showed that there were significantly more electives at East Stroudsburg than at Wallenpaupack. After examining the documents filed with the State Board and hearing exhibits and listening carefully to all the testimony, the committee's job was to come up with a recommendation that was based on the evidence that it had received. It was critical during the process that the committee, either collectively or individuals within the committee, should not submit their individual views as to how what the result should be for the evidence that was presented to us by the lawyers of the various parties. The committee acknowledges that the emotions involved in the transfer were high, and that folks involved in the Porter Township Initiative have spent many years of their lives working on this. The committee would particularly like to recognize the courage of Sabrina and Samantha Herman, who were the only current students from either side of the issue to provide public comment to the committee, and did a fabulous job doing that. The committee is grateful for the cooperation of all parties and councils during the proceeding. We're also very grateful to the work of Christopher Sullivan, who was lent to us by the Governor's Office and did a fabulous job putting together the information and drafting our recommendation and report. By way of summary, the committee has reached the following conclusions. The significant reduction in property taxes appears to be as much a motivating factor for the transfer as any of the educational factors presented. The division of Hemlock Farms into separate school districts is not a unique phenomenon for communities in this area of the state, and the State Board should not overly concern itself with how school district boundary lines impact a community's social setting when making a decision on whether to approve or disapprove the transfer. PTI failed to demonstrate that Wallenpaupack provides a superior education compared to East Stroudsburg on multiple fronts, including school performance, school safety, diversity, socialization, and curriculum. Further, East Stroudsburg successfully demonstrated it will be financially harmed if the transfer were to occur. Accordingly, the committee concluded unanimously that the creation of the PTI and its transfer from East Stroudsburg to Wallenpaupack should be denied by the State Board. We had an order which has been prepared, and I also have a motion ready for the time when we take action.
Thank you, Wendy. Any questions for Wendy? Yeah.
How many students are impacted here? We're talking about 45?
40, 45, 46 is 30 in Hemlock Farms, and the others are scattered throughout Porter Township.
If the kids are in Hemlock Farms community only, and the community is, it's an interesting community. It's folks who have grown up there, but also folks who moved there from New York. It's a very rich community. It's one that is really focused on making sure that its community values are protected, and it behaves like a village.
Say 40, 45 students.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, Mary?
Thank you, Wendy. I'm looking at the standard review on page 4 because I'm concerned about what we are authorized as the state board to do and not to do. And I understand the Court of Common Pleas did approve this, and now it's at the state. And the language of the statute addressing independent districts says in pertinent part, when a court decree is received, the state board shall place the item on its agenda and either approve or disapprove the creation of and transfer. If approval is given, the board shall do that. If disapproval, the board shall state its reasons, and the independent school district shall be provided a hearing if it so desires. I don't know what the standards are for approval or disapproval, and I know there was an explanation given in the following paragraph, but has this issue been addressed in terms of what the standards are that we use to make an approval or disapproval determination?
Yes, and we included some of that in the opinion. I didn't read the entire opinion because it would have been forever. Let me try and parse out the various pieces of the process so we understand exactly what our job is, and perhaps I could make it clear. The Court of Common Pleas becomes involved once a group of taxpayers have determined that they would like an independent school district. And the job of the court at that point is either to say, yes, we can create this independent school district for the purposes of determining whether the transfer should occur, or no, we cannot. And it's usually, there are not enough taxpayers have signed the petition or something procedural that would prevent the creation of the independent school district. Once that has occurred, which is the job of Common Pleas to send it to the Secretary of Education. The Secretary of Education then looks at the issues from an educational perspective. Is this transfer from, in this case, East Stroudsburg into Wallenpaupack, educationally a good idea? And the Secretary looks at it from not only the perspective of the children in the independent district, but also from the perspective of the children in the receiving district and the sending district. So his or her job is, in this case it was key, is focused only on the educational issues. Once it comes to us, we are not confined to discussing only the educational issues. We can't say, no, court, you should not have provided, you should not have created an independent district. Our job is to look at all factors and determine whether it is appropriate or not to make the transfer from one district to another. And I say all factors. It is not our job to look at financial factors. That is the job of the court, and the court did that in this case.
Sorry. The standards that you are addressing, where are they found?
As I understand it, there are a number of opinions that have been written by the State Board over the years, addressing exactly these kind of cases where the State Board has had to make a determination. Obviously, everything comes from the statute, and you're not going to get court cases focusing on the standard unless, of course, there has been an appeal from the state board. And in fact, I don't think, and I wish Chris was here to tell me, I don't think that there is an appeal from the state board. So I think that the likelihood of you having a court opinion describing what the standard is either nil, and maybe Chris can correct me, or very slight. So in essence, there is not, I can't pull up an opinion and throw it into the recommendation because there is none. All we can go on is what the statute says about our power and what the state board has done in previous instances. And again, often these things are not opposed. So we had one, I think last year, the Regal Bill one, but it wasn't opposed, so we didn't have to write a recommendation. But we did have a hearing because we feel it's very important in these cases to really get the community engaged and involved and have a public airing of everyone's issue. In the Regal Bill, we had a hearing, there was no opposition, so we made a recommendation for the board to approve. In this instance, because there was a continuing battle, we had the hearing, and I think that there are very few cases in which that has occurred over the years.
So, bottom line, we have fact-finding abilities
Yes, we do.
at this level, and this is just so I understand what the process is that we're being asked to participate in here. The trial court also had fact-finding responsibilities. You're saying they're limited to the financial issues, or were they also broader?
No,
They
they were not broader. They looked at, and I read this some months ago, there's some transfer, obviously. If there's going to be a transfer, there's going to be some tax obligations, and there's going to be some financial issues, and I think there's some bonds at issue. So that whole portion has to be decided because often there is a significant immediate impact and a long-term impact as well. So there has to be a judicial determination as to how the parties are going to divide up the dollars immediately and going forward for a certain period of time. The court did that, and that issue was not before us. The parties had, I think there was an appeal process in the middle of it. There had been some procedural battles going on, but once we got it, we just put that into a box and said, okay, this is how it would happen financially if we were to approve the transfer. Thank you.
Anyone else? Just for the record, I sat in on the hearings, and I came to a slightly different conclusion than the committee, and I'll elaborate under the question for various reasons, but everything that was stated very accurately occurred in terms of all of the different points. I just had a different take on it, but that's just me. Any other questions for Wendy? Okay, we will move now into public comment on any action items that you want to address, and if there's a crowd, we will take it orderly from the first row to second row. Show of hands of who wants to address the state board. Okay then, we'll start in the first row. You're on. State your name and try not to make it redundant. We'll be here all day. Thank you.
That's it? Okay. Good morning. Michelle Jansen. I'm from Chambersburg. I run a civics organization out there for educating community members on issues. And one of our issues has been, of course, the establishment of a Common Core state standards, or the PA standards is now we're referring to them in the revisions. I think my biggest issues, just very generally, are still some concerns about whether these standards are going to be effective and good. I think the math concerns and the developmentally appropriate, especially the lower grades concerns with some of the requirements that are made, I think are the two biggest things that I've heard about that I think we should all be aware about and concerned and keep an eye on. The other, of course, as Senator Dinniman has pointed out many times, the costs. And we're all very concerned about that. I think I listened carefully to the hearing on the Keystone tests, and it seemed like the final talking point it came down to was the cost of the tests themselves and whether that's an unfunded mandate. And I understand, I don't think you all feel it is, because we already had the testing and we already had money for that. But to me, it was more the other issues that were brought up during the meeting. It's the things that are generated by the tests, the remediation, the project-based assessments, and that kind of thing. I think that's more where our unfunded mandate is coming from, and I think that's something that still bears a lot of examination. And I know you all are working together trying to get some statements of cost, and I'm really hoping that comes along and we all do understand that, because I think that's a big concern. And also, I know Dr. Demorska and I have talked, and we couldn't have a meeting about how the data collection is a huge concern to me. And again, we hear about stuff going on in other states, and I realize that's not necessarily germane to our conversation. But I think we do need to be concerned, because there seems like there has been a big push through some grants we've gotten from the federal government setting up our state longitudinal database, and how working with the Common Core initiative, not just the standards, but the initiative that's stated in the Race to the Top applications, and now in our waiver that we just got granted by the federal government for the No Child Left Behind. How those all work together in terms of data that's being collected now that's not necessarily objectionable at all. I've seen what our school districts are collecting, and there's nothing terribly objectionable about that. But it's the potential for why these databases were created, what could be required by the federal government down the road, the changes to the FERPA laws and protections of privacy that seem a little vague and open to not necessarily giving the data to the federal government, but allowing access to data by the federal government, by vendors of education who are now considered educational experts to improve education, that kind of thing. So to me, those are the broadest concerns that I have, that I think we need to pay attention to. And I'm really trying to understand where those contracts that we've signed with the federal government, what are we obligated to? I've heard some personal comments that perhaps we're not obligated to everything we agreed to in the Race to the Top applications, but I'm trying to get a handle on who can answer those questions for me and for all of us, so we understand exactly what are Pennsylvania's obligations in terms of data collected on our students and what that could evolve to in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, yes, sir. You're on.
Morning, I'm Bill Bartle. I'm the Education Policy Director for Pennsylvania Partnerships for Children. PPC strongly supports the proposed Chapter 4 regulations and urges the State Board to adopt them. The regulations would adopt the Pennsylvania core standards in English and math and assessments aligned to those standards, including Keystone exams. Chapter 4 also includes important safeguards and supports for struggling students, such as supplemental instruction and accommodations for disabled students and English language learners. For too long, the Commonwealth has been graduating students without assurance that they are ready to transition to post-secondary education, the workforce, or the military. In post-secondary education, we define very broadly. It could be a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, an industry credential program, technical school, very broad definition of that. But in Pennsylvania in 2012, 1/3 of the high school graduates, or about 44,000 students, received their diplomas without demonstrating proficiency in math and reading via the 11th grade PSSA or the 12th grade retake. And this problem isn't isolated to a handful of urban or poor school districts. It's happening in rural, suburban, and urban charter schools, school districts, and career and technical centers across the state. And what happens is these young people then transition to the next chapter of their life without the skills to be successful. Pennsylvania state-owned universities and community college reported that 1 in 3 students, recent high school graduates attending those institutions, are unable to take a college-level math or English course for credit. And that remediation required costs the parents, students, and taxpayers about $26 million each year, making the affordability of college that further out of reach for young people. The proposed Chapter 4 regulations you're voting on today address these concerns. They adopt the Pennsylvania Core Standards, which were created by Pennsylvania teachers and are based on the Common Core state standards that the State Board adopted back in 2010. These rigorous internationally benchmarked standards outline what students should know at each grade level. They do not, however, determine how the standards should be taught in the classroom or undermine Pennsylvania's longstanding tradition of local control. Curriculum, textbooks, student materials, all remain a decision of the local school district. And school districts across the state have already been working to align their curriculum to these new standards. And the Keystone exams, which are aligned to the standards, are end-of-course exams that a student takes immediately following completion of the course. The Keystone exams in English Literature, Algebra 1, and Biology have replaced the 11th grade PSSAs this past year for math and science and reading. And the Keystones can also be used as the course final exam, which means students are not necessarily taking more tests, but they're taking better tests. Keystones have a number of benefits over the traditional single comprehensive exam administered in 11th grade. The Keystones are administered closer to the point of instruction, where the content is fresher and more relevant to the student. If a student does not pass the Keystone exam, he or she is provided supplemental instruction and can retake the Keystone or a portion of the exam. The exams assess more focused and in-depth knowledge. And because they're required for graduation, students are much more likely to take the exams seriously and try to do their best. So again, PPC strongly supports the proposed revisions to Chapter 4 and urges the board to adopt them. These regulations will help reaffirm a commitment made to Pennsylvania students, parents, and taxpayers that all of our students, regardless of what public school they attend, deserve an education that prepares them for the challenges that they will face after high school. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I believe over here on the left, someone had their hand up. Yes, ma'am, you're next. And we'll move back to the next row and move across.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Carrie Harris. I'm the Executive Director of A+ Schools. We're Pittsburgh's independent advocate for equity and excellence in public education. I come before you today in support of the full implementation of the Pennsylvania Common Core Standards, not just as an advocate, but as a parent of 3 Pittsburgh public school students. I, like most parents, want my children to be ready for college and career when they graduate from high school. They're growing up in a world where the bar is being raised every day for what they will need to know in order to be successful in life. They'll have to compete with students not just from other states like Massachusetts, which is showing increased improvement in math and science achievement due to high standards that they have set, but also with children from Finland, South Korea, Singapore, among others, where students are learning concepts younger and faster than our own. I know mastering the skills and concepts embodied in the Pennsylvania Common Core Standards will not be easy, but I believe that effort creates ability. I want my children to struggle at first with difficult concepts. I want their teachers to work with them to help them persevere until they get it. I want them to know that the satisfaction that comes with hard work when they meet high expectations that we set for them. Should I tell them that the state thought they would be up for the challenge and of harder work this year? As an advocate, I want the change for all children in Pittsburgh, especially African American students, many of whom are stuck in a cycle of poverty that only a great education can break. Right now, we know that too many African American students are not graduating ready for college or career. We are fortunate to have the Pittsburgh Promise, a $40,000 a year scholarship for $40,000 over 4 years scholarship for graduates of the Pittsburgh Public Schools that is removing financial barriers for college for our students. Yet last year, only 38% of African American students were able to access the Promise based on their GPAs, and only 63% of African American students graduated. We cannot allow the soft bigotry of low expectations to be what perpetuates the gaps in African American achievement and graduation rates. Yet some in this state are arguing for a slowdown of the implementation of the standards, or not to raise the bar at all, as it will unfairly lower test scores at a time when teaching professionals are going to be held accountable for their results. To that I say we cannot wait. We cannot wait for poverty to be ended, as we know there are schools in Pittsburgh and across the Commonwealth that are successful at raising achievement for our most vulnerable students. We cannot wait for standards to be perfect, as we are all human and none will ever be. These standards were developed over years with inputs from education researchers, teachers, teaching professionals, and others to be able to raise the bar for all our kids. When will be a good time to implement them? We cannot wait for someone else to work out our curriculum, lesson plans, and materials that help students understand these crucial concepts that are aligned to what we know is needed for today's workforce. Let's put our trust in our teachers and our administrators to review the standards, and let's allow their creativity and passion for learning to allow our students to learn more while they're in schools. Teachers and administrators in Pittsburgh are already working on the mechanics of getting students ready to reach the Common Core standards. We've observed teachers working on specific lessons in math, figuring out how they will make sure that all their students persevere and understand what's being taught. This is a sign that gives me hope as a parent. I know that the way forward is going to be difficult. I know that you will face pressure to ease up, slow down, or abandon this effort. But our children, mine, yours, and those from all backgrounds in our public schools should not be punished or left behind because of the fear of adults. Instead, let's trust our children to reach these high expectations. Let's teach them a powerful lesson that difficult things are worth doing. And let's, as parents, help them reach the end of high school and have learned the skills and concepts that will make all our children competitive in a global economy. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Next, in the second row.
Good morning. I'm David Patty, the President and CEO of the Pennsylvania Business Council. The Pennsylvania Business Council strongly supports the Chapter 4 regulatory package that's before the State Board today. The proposed academic standards, we believe, were an outstanding improvement when they were first put forward before you in 2010, but they're even better today. The input of lawmakers, the public, and interest groups, and the deliberation of this State Board have given us a better product. They've brought appropriate scrutiny and debate to the important topics. Pennsylvania Business Council believes that the final product is stronger for the debate. Rigorous academic standards with aligned assessments that seek to ensure student mastery of core subjects are essential to making our students truly ready for careers in post-secondary education. A well-educated and prepared population is absolutely necessary to grow Pennsylvania's talented workforce. And it's absolutely necessary to make Pennsylvania competitive so that we can be the economic powerhouse that we have the potential to be. The Pennsylvania Business Council believes that the Pennsylvania core standards provide a firm, well-understood, internationally benchmarked foundation upon which each of our schools can build its own curriculum reflective of its local needs and preferences. The Pennsylvania Business Council has long supported end-of-course exams with rapid remediation that helps students to master core competencies before being pushed along to more advanced coursework for which they may lack the skills necessary to succeed. PBC supports making the Keystone exams, the aligned assessments, a graduation requirement to earn a Pennsylvania high school diploma. We strongly urge adoption of this regulation, and thank you for your hard work in this initiative.
Thank you. Next, sir.
Good morning. My name is Tom Wilson. I am a retired Rear Admiral in the United States Navy. I'm also a member of Mission Readiness, a national, nonprofit, national security organization of over 400 retired admirals and generals. Chairman Whittick, Secretary Dumaresque, and distinguished members of the Pennsylvania State Board of Education, I am honored to have this opportunity to detail my support for Pennsylvania core standards and aligned assessments that are included in the revised Chapter 4 regulations. This proposal will not only benefit our children's education, but also our future national security. Mission Readiness is mainly concerned with the recent data from the Department of Defense indicating that most young Americans, 17 to 24, are unable to join the military. Today's servicemen and women operate complex, high-tech weaponry and find themselves in intense situations that require not only proficiency in technology, but strategic thinking, as well as decisive and diplomacy. This makes it all the more alarming that poor educational achievement is one of the biggest reasons why an estimated 75% of all young Americans are unable to join the military. On average, 1 out of 5 students in Pennsylvania will not graduate from high school. Of those who do graduate and want to join the military, 22% do not possess sufficient skills to pass the military's entrance exam, testing math, literacy, and problem solving. This situation has clear implications regarding international competitiveness and a focus of the recent Council on Foreign Relations task force led by, among others, former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. The task force reported challenged American schools to do better in order to produce citizens who can serve either in uniform or the civilian sector. Full implementation of the Pennsylvania core standards and aligned assessments is such an effort to strengthen the education of students in this Commonwealth. Pennsylvania's core standards make English language arts and math education more rigorous and relevant to success in the 21st century. Standards alone, however, are not enough. To have an impact on student outcomes, there must be accountability. That accountability comes from aligned assessments and a system for reporting results, so everyone will know how students are really faring. If we do not know how students are really performing, we do not know the scope of potential problems in our education system, nor can we make informed efforts to solve them. Also of special concern for our nation's approximately 2 million children from military families is student mobility. On average, a military child will move 6 to 9 times during pre-K through 12th grade education, and my children fall into that category. This can be a frustrating experience as these students often find themselves either ahead or behind their new school peers because of a lack of consistency between different states' education standards. This is an issue that military members have addressed through various avenues, including Mission Readiness, the Military Child Education Coalition, and the Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission. Pennsylvania's core standards will go even further in maintaining consistency and expanding educational opportunities for military children and other children who relocate in the midst of their education. Just as business and industry needs a highly qualified workforce to compete in the 21st century global marketplace, our armed forces need the same highly qualified sailors, soldiers, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen to protect our future national security. Full implementation of the Pennsylvania core standards and aligned assessments is an important part of our future national security. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, across the back there, ma'am?
Thank you.
I'm not forgetting anybody here, right? Oh, you came in late. I apologize. That's okay. Come on up. You'll be next. I have to keep everything in order here, or I'll get confused.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak to the board. I'm Joan Law Flynn. I chair the Education Committee for the Pennsylvania State Conference of NAACP units. I'm a teacher. I've spent 40 years teaching. And I have no objection to rigorous curriculum. I'm here because the Keystone exams need to be separated from the core as graduation criteria. The first speaker referred to Massachusetts, and I want you all to be aware that Massachusetts has a trauma-sensitive education system. And on its website, there are all sorts of resources for teachers to draw from to deal with children who live in adverse conditions. We advocate for a trauma-informed education system in Pennsylvania. It would do much to end dropout. It would do much to end suicide. It would do much to raise the scores in the Commonwealth. So I just ask you all to do some consideration of the following few questions. In your review of testimony concerning using the Keystones as the graduation criteria, Have you analyzed what it takes for a student to successfully meet the cutoff score for proficiency? Have you looked at what materials a child must have in the school building? Have you looked at what technology is necessary for a child to master the constructs embedded in the test? Have you looked at what kind of background knowledge students need in order to successfully master this test? Have you looked at the human resources that need to be in place? Have you looked at the emotional supports that need to be in place for children who are struggling with adversity? And have you looked at the home environments that are conducive to success on a rigorous, life-defining test? If you have not looked into those things, how then do you judge that this is a fair thing to do to young people? And then I listened to the comment about children learning to face difficult tasks. And I wonder if you've thought about, when you close your eyes and look at these kids, who do you see? Some are homeless. Some are in foster care and struggling with grief and loss. Some are in homes where there's physical abuse. Some are being sexually molested. Some of these children are in homes with alcoholic or drug-addicted adults. Some of these children live with terminally ill loved ones for whom they give care. Some of these children have an incarcerated parent or two incarcerated parents. The Prison Society suggests that probably 100,000 Pennsylvania children have an incarcerated parent. They are dealing with shame and grief and loss and fear every second of the day. Some have come to this country and don't have academic level English proficiency. The latest statistic I heard was that 81% of these children cannot pass the Keystone. Some live in chaotic communities where they're afraid to walk to school. Truancy level is high. The children are traumatized. Some are ill. Some are debilitated. Some have no vision or dental care. Some of these children are on strong medications. Some are suffering school phobia, math phobia, reading phobia. Some of the children that have to take this test have come to this country from war-torn zones. They sit in class and have flashbacks. They have night terrors. These are the children who don't do well on high-stakes tests. Now, when you vote today, you are casting your ballot on the life of these kids. You hold their lives in your hands. And I just beg you not to take that lightly. All these young people have potential. They need their diploma to work their way out of the negative circumstances with which they contend every day, the difficult, really difficult issues of fighting for their lives inch by inch. And they will become highly productive, successful citizens if they have access to their future. You can make it impossible for these people, or you can give them life. You have immense, immense power over their futures. I ask you to reflect on that. I ask you to have the moral stamina and the courage to protect these young people.
Thank you, sir. You're over on this side. No, I'm saying thank you to her, but I'm referring to him as sir. I apologize.
Good morning. My name is Jonathan Sattel, and I'm the founding executive director of PennCan, the Pennsylvania Campaign for Achievement Now. PennCan is a nonprofit education advocacy organization working to accelerate the pace of ed reform so that all students have access to the quality education they deserve. I'm here today to express PennCan's support for the regulations to update and implement the PA core standards. These standards reflect the input and collaboration of numerous parents and teachers, administrators and legislators at the state and at the local level. The updates address concerns raised by some stakeholders, but they still retain the rigor and the accountability achieved when Pennsylvania first adopted these standards back in 2010, which feels like years ago, but was only back in 2010. So making sure that Pennsylvania has strong standards and rigorous assessments aligned to those standards is a core function of the State Board of Education. And that's because we all share a profound responsibility in making sure that students graduating from Pennsylvania public schools are well prepared for college and career success. I'm here to remind everyone that the problem we're trying to solve, and the reason we're here today for this vote, is that everyone in this room is unwilling to accept the status quo where so many of our high school graduates need significant remediation in college. And local school districts have always and will always remain the entity in charge of developing the curriculum, and teachers have always and will always remain the people most responsible for impacting student achievement. But it's up to the state, and specifically the State Board of Education, to set high expectations for student learning. And that's why I strongly urge members of this committee to support the approval of the Chapter 4 regulations. So thanks for your time and the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you. Sir?
Good morning. My name is Dr. George Steinhoff. I'm the superintendent of schools in the Penn Delco School District. I also currently serve as the chair of the Delaware County Chief School Officers Association. I'm here today to share with you perspectives and concerns regarding the use of Keystone examination results as a graduation requirement. I have no doubt that the original goals that preceded the development and the implementation of Keystone exams likely had merit. There's no question about that. But somewhere along the way, these goals have morphed into a graduation requirement and policy that is unquestionably unpopular, it's unproductive, is unfunded, and ultimately unnecessary in my opinion. The Keystone graduation requirement is widely unpopular for so many reasons. It's clear that the compelling argument for a Keystone graduation requirement has yet to be made. I know of no major professional organization that represents the experts and the practitioners and the leaders in our field who support the use of Keystone exams as an additional graduation requirement. Parents ask what this new requirement tends to fix. My mother said to me she thinks that it's a solution that's in search of a problem. Students see it as a high-stakes hurdle that impedes their learning time, and it distracts their attention from advanced placement tests, SAT tests, ACT tests, things that will be measured on school performance profiles, and of course their individual class assignments that we all too often forget about. Educators know that it's going to have the effect of narrowing the curriculum, precisely what experts caution us about time and again. Principals wonder where they're going to find the time in their school schedule to offer Keystone remediation classes. Superintendents and board members struggle to determine which effective and proven programs are going to have to be cut so that they can fund Keystone-related supports and remediation. Collectively, the people who are closest to the field and most affected by Keystone graduation requirements keep asking, why are we doing this? The Keystone graduation requirement doesn't advance the learning and achievement needs of the best and brightest students, our average students, or even our struggling learners. Smart students who are carrying 4.0 GPAs, they pass multiple AP tests, they're scoring at exemplary levels on the SAT. They see these tests as an unnecessary intrusion, especially during the spring testing cycle, which occurs during the AP testing period as well. Average students stress at the prospect of losing the opportunity to take relevant and interesting elective courses that can shape their college and career aspirations. They wonder why they have to prove to the state, after already proving to their teachers in the school, that they have in fact learned the essential concepts of algebra, literature, and biology. They know if they fail at Keystone, They're going to be assigned to a remedial class, which will carry the statement of their performance clear for all their friends to see. And struggling learners, students who question the relevance and importance of school perhaps, or even average students who simply don't test well, they see this graduation requirement as another card that's stacked against them. Students who aren't academically inclined, who still come to school and tolerate and they attend to their core subjects, might instead really excel at the arts or technical or business-oriented courses. And for them, those courses are critical to their overall success. We risk losing them. We risk having them drop out if they learn that they can't take those classes because they're stuck in an unending cycle of remediation. School districts are learning that the Keystone graduation requirement is not free, it's costly. Given the high stakes, students and parents will demand and PDE will require remediation, retesting, and supplemental instruction. Without additional funds, school districts like mine will be forced to pass along the new expense to taxpayers or draw upon resources that were otherwise allocated. And in practice, this could mean taking away staff at the elementary level to fund staff at the secondary level. Do we really want to pull staff away from elementary class sizes reduction so that we can fund additional remediation teaching programs at the high school? Money could be better spent on proven programs that we know. In closing, I just offer a question. If the Keystone exams were decoupled from the graduation requirement, who would object? Certainly not students, not parents, and not teachers. The vast majority of school and district administrators, school board members, and superintendents would not object. Believers in local control, researchers who show how test-driven school policy is bad policy, advocates for the disabled, and students with special needs, they would not object to the decoupling of Keystone examinations and high rigor standards to an additional duplicative graduation requirement. But most telling to me is the parents who I have found will fight the hardest to demand the best things for their kids. They are not the ones who will object. In fact, most of them would applaud it. If the most important stakeholder groups do not support additional graduation requirements tied to a high-stake test, if they don't understand what problem the requirement attempted to fix, and they won't object to seeing it go away, then perhaps it is cause for pause. I thank you for your time, and I appreciate your efforts to improve education in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Next, along the second row over here to the right. Yes, ma'am. Again, in the interest of time, and it hasn't happened yet, but try not to be redundant if you've already made your spiel yesterday or whatever. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Janice Bowman, and I did talk yesterday. I just want to touch on a little bit of information I want to give you that you requested or stated, and some other things. Today I want to start with a little article, which I will be giving to you later. It was actually from the World Socialist website. I do all my own research because I know I can't trust the reporters too much anymore. So one of their questions is, what is the Common Core U.S. Education Initiative? And I thought, man, they got to be in support of this. But they wrote, under the scheme, all children, starting as young as 5 years old, will be tested to see if they are college or career ready. Those deemed unworthy of advancement to college will be channeled into trade skill track. They also stated the movement towards tracking every young student, either for college or workplace, after high school is part of the promotion of a new normal, of mass unemployment and low-paying jobs. For decades, a college education was presented as the only means to lift them up. Now, even larger sections of political and corporate establishments are insisting that college education should not be deemed necessary. This corresponds with the estimates by employers, 25% of new jobs, which is true. You get laid off and you find out you got an $8 or $10 job. You don't need a high school education in the next years. So that's what Common Core is. I did look up the function of the U.S. Department of Education because I'm having trouble understanding how the national government, federal, can come into us here and tell us what to do. And actually the function is the federal government and Department of Education are not heavily involved which I can't figure where they got this, in determining curriculum or education standards, with the recent exception of No Child Left Behind. This has been left to state and local school districts. The quality of education institutions and their degrees is maintained through informal private process known as accreditation, over which the Department of Education has no direct public jurisdiction control. Well, I don't see that happening here. Also, I gave you a list of related legislation. You want to do a study, look at it from 1965 to 2010, what money you took from the feds, what mandates were funded, unfunded, how it affected the schools' budgets, and how it's not working. Why are we continuing to do the same thing when we're only getting 7 to 10% from federal money and we're being judged and pushed by that? So I have that for you there. Yesterday I brought up, which you weren't here, Senator and the rest, the National Sexuality Standards. It has come to our attention that some of the books in the school are as bad as porn, and I am very upset. I have brought it to the board. Now, I was told it's the local school districts picking the books, but it's you making the standards, so you are part of the blame. And I am again bringing it up. I want it looked into, that we don't have porn books in the schools. And I don't know which schools have it because I'm being told I need an attorney to get the list of the books I have. So, you also asked about sexual standards. It's under the Pennsylvania Code, Title 22, Chapter 4, Section 29. It's called the Academic Standards for Health, Safety, and Physical Education. What I would suggest is look at that, look at this, and see if it's not matching, and if we need to change some things to prevent porn from being in schools. I gave you the actual article from where I found this here. The next thing I have for you is, this is a study I did on Allentown of their federal and state budgets. 1996, we had 4.1% of federal money in Allentown. We had 11.43% in 2011. Now, we're going up little by little, but it's costing us more as taxpayers. We're getting more money, and we're failing more. So something should be looked into why that's happening. That money is not helping us. So I'm giving you the actual proof what state and all that is. The other thing I want to talk about is, this is a list of people you're getting who can't be here from June to December 2012. I did a study of who lost their homes due to property taxes. Some of them are in their 39 years. Thanks to school boards that can't afford it. These are people that can't be here that you aren't even thinking about. So I want to give you their names. Then I gave you a letter called the Open Letter to Governor Parnell requesting withdrawal from SBAC. Governor Parnell is the governor of Alaska. Alaska actually did not accept Common Core, but it's being slipped in the door the same way it came here in June, 4 years ago when you weren't in session, and it just came right in because Governor Rendell signed it. Now we got Corbett signing it. Now we have passing the bill here now, but they're not in session doing the same thing. But in this letter from Parnell, he actually brought up Governor Corbett. I don't know if you know that. But it says, the nation knows that ExxonMobil wrote a letter reminding Governor of Pennsylvania their philanthropic contribution recently to the Governor of Pennsylvania when that state began reconsideration of their implementation of the Common Core at the behest of the Senate Democrats in that state. Of course, I'm certain that you have enough backbone to stand up to ExxonMobil desires to have Common Core implemented. If you were to implement the Common Core curriculum based on the word of ExxonMobil, this would certainly make SB 21 look like the crony capitalism rather than the application of supply-side economics. If you go on here, you can click and get the letter. To me, it looked like a mafia letter, and I was just wondering if maybe you've got the same copy. Because ExxonMobil is owned by Bill Gates. So you want to look that up. The last thing, there's one thing on here I'd like you to read. You asked me
Ma'am,
for
excuse me
I'm
for a
really
second.
quick. This
Yeah,
is,
you're gonna have to
one
wrap it
minute.
up because most of the stuff is irrelevant, but just keep
I know
going.
it's relevant to you, but it's irrelevant
No, it's
to me
irrelevant
as a
to
taxpayer.
the
Okay.
germane
I
to
will
this
wait.
argument, but you're taking up
I have
valuable time
this,
for other
I
people.
want you to read is the Declaration of Independence, which a teacher wrote. This is where I stand. But the last thing I want to do is ask any of the senators or House of Representatives in here. I want to know who gives a committee, like a school board or any committee, the power to vote on a subject that is on hold by the governor. Because the governor wrote a letter holding the Common Core. The Senate and House are working on issues with Common Core, and we're not going to vote on it until they did the studies, talk to their taxpayers. I vote for the governor, I vote for the senators and House of Representatives. I don't vote for you. How do you overpower the governor that put it on hold to vote today? So anybody that says yes, I will be talking to every senator, House of Representative, governor individually why you have the authority to vote on something on hold that is not taken off a hold.
Good.
I want to know how. And if it's 6 years of terms that you have in office, I want you, Senator Dimmerman, Roebuck, anybody in here, we need 1-year term for these type of people. If power control goes to their head, they can overpower a governor and the whole Congress. We need a change. So please look into that. Thank you. Don't vote on it today.
Thank you. Next, across the back. Yes. Ashley.
Good morning.
Hit your mic, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ashley DiMauro, and I am the Pennsylvania State Director for Students First. We all know that Article 3 of Section 14 of our state constitution requires that our state provides for the maintenance and support of a thorough and efficient public education system. In order to ensure that our educational system is held accountable for preparing students to be college and career ready, and in order to ensure that the investment we are making in our students is yielding results, Pennsylvania has a system of standards-based education that sets a bar for our students and to ensure that they're meeting that bar. In July 2010, this board adopted improved standards in math and reading that were based off of the Common Core Initiative, which replaced our original standards adopted in the late 90s. Now, this board is making the changes necessary after listening to the comments and concerns of many Pennsylvanians, and the product before us today represents the result of listening to the needs of our state. The Pennsylvania Common Core standards will help the state's students to be college and career ready. By the time our students reach college level and compete for jobs in our international workforce, they are at inequitable places due to the wide spectrum of learning standards in our nation, even if they have done all of their homework and passed all of their graduation requirements. An alarming majority of students are not ready for college or the workforce, and they are not prepared to compete in the global economy. Our Pennsylvania Core Standards is the result of a state-led plan to address and close the learning gaps among states and hold U.S. students to academically challenging, rigorous standards on par with their international counterparts. Our core standards will also increase rigor for students. The Fordham Institute compared every state's standards to Common Core and found that Pennsylvania's previous English language arts standards were repetitive, lacked coherence between grades, and did not prioritize and failed to include key concepts. Our math standards fared even worse. Pennsylvania standards did not prioritize foundational knowledge in the lower grades and skimped on content in the secondary grades. Implementation of the updated, more rigorous Pennsylvania Core Standards is necessary to link foundational concepts so students graduate college and career ready. In closing, a comprehensive system of education should include rigorous standards for students and aligned assessments that accurately assess whether or not students are meeting those standards. The Chapter 4 language you are considering today will better prepare our students by setting a higher bar for them and by providing assessments that will actually tell us how well students fare and where improvements are needed. We applaud the work of this board and all of the stakeholders who have gotten us to this point, and we urge your support for the Chapter 4 regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Across the back. Yes, sir? Representative? I want to welcome Representative Roebuck, by the way. I apologize. He came in and I didn't recognize you. Thank you.
Morning, Chairman Whittig, Acting Secretary Dumrest, which I hope quick to be Secretary Dumrest, and my fellow chairs on Education Committee, Chairman Roebuck and Chairman Clymer. Just real quick, I graduated, I'm not going to tell you what year, you'll date me, in the 60s, and SAT scores were much higher than they are today on average. No national standards, no state standards. And Secretary Dumrest and I have had several conversations with a lot of dynamics here. And I'm going to be very brief. I'm going to give you a real quick piece of Cato. This is empirical evidence, not anecdotal as we're told for Porter Township. And what we've heard here, a lot of anecdotal evidence. This is empirical, really, really quick. The first test is the Program for International Science Assessment. Some that did higher than the United States had national standards. Some that did lower than the United States had national standards. Some that did higher than the United States had no national standards. The next one is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, that test. Same result, mixed. Standards, including the 1994 and the No Child Left Behind, have not achieved academic excellence. That is not what does it. Classroom does it. And I know Secretary Dumrest and I'm urging you to delay 26 citations in here that you can research. Actual empirical data on national standards. Thank you. I need to leave.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. That was just Representative Tolman. I'm exhausted across the back. And over here, I see a hand. Yes, sir. I believe this is the last participant. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jesse McCree, representing the Pennsylvania Workforce Development Association. I'll keep my comments brief here. On behalf of the Pennsylvania Workforce Development Association, I am here to express support for the State Board of Education's proposed Chapter 4 regulations that would adopt the Pennsylvania core standards and aligned assessment, including the Keystone exams. If Pennsylvania's workforce is going to succeed in the 21st century in this global economy we've been hearing about today, it's critically important that our students graduate from high school with strong academic foundations necessary either to continue in post-secondary education or entering the labor market as workforce ready. The Common Core standards and the Keystone exams will benefit the Commonwealth's public education system in acting as a quality measurement tool, ensuring college and workforce readiness while retaining flexibility in the school's curriculum. The Common Core benchmarks are designed to ensure students are equipped with the skills necessary to succeed in this competitive global economy, as well as to reduce the large proficiency disparity among high school graduates statewide. These draft regulations will adopt rigorous and internationally benchmarked standards in English and math, and provide students a variety of assessment tools to demonstrate their proficiency. In aligning academic standards with college and workplace readiness initiatives, the Pennsylvania Common Core standards are a step in the right direction, helping to ensure graduates are able to compete and succeed in today's marketplace. Every day, our workforce development professionals across the state deal with what's called known as a skills gap. And that is a mismatch between what employers seek and what graduates have. These Common Core standards and the proposed Chapter 4 regulations would help reduce that skills gap and make the academic credentials that students gain, such as a high school diploma, mean something in today's marketplace. So on behalf of the Pennsylvania Workforce Development System, we do strongly support these important changes to Pennsylvania academic standards and aligned assessments, including the Keystone exams. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I believe that was the last participant. Barring any other hands.
Can I just make one last point? I know I already spoke, but just after hearing a lot of people proponents for it,
well, this isn't. I apologize. This is not a debate. We listened. We heard everyone's things, and now I see someone else with their hand up back there that's coming forward. So I apologize.
Yeah, I wish I would have waited and gone after all of us, put it that way.
Well, you should have sat in the front row. Go ahead.
My name is Denise Nahum. I'm founder and executive director of the Educational Enrichment Initiative. which is the acronym TEEI. We support over 50 centers throughout the state of Pennsylvania that provide supplemental educational services to 5,000 students. Our students range those who can barely afford a very meager tuition to those who come to us for enrichment because they have second graders doing algebra. We have a huge range of students that come to us. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I'd like to bring attention to, most notably, the audience that the supplemental education services in Pennsylvania are required to be licensed as private schools. There is no provision for private businesses operating as academic supplemental services in Pennsylvania. I would encourage you to look at a franchise like a Sylvan, a Huntington, a Kumon, a Mathnasium, and Athena Learning Center. Compare New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has 75% less, 25% of what New Jersey has in terms of private supplemental enrichment programming. That is directly because of the department's strict regulations requiring them to go through privately licensed regulations. We support the core standards, absolutely. I think that our centers would welcome very explicit and specific skills that children need in order to thrive in today's market. However, I cannot agree with the Keystone exams being a requirement for partial graduation unless you have the supplemental services in place for those students. This comes down to cost. Our centers, the people that are attending those centers are paying for supplemental services out of their pocket. Again, the range is huge. We provide scholarships to those who cannot afford. I don't see any cost coming towards supplemental services, and I really don't see how this Keystone exam can be a requirement without supplemental support. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now, before we go to the action item, we're going to discuss and kind of educate the board on the proposed revisions as it came back from, we had passed this earlier, and it came back for revisions based on public comment and concerns from the legislature. And I'm going to ask Secretary Gumeresk to elaborate on what those changes were.
Thank you. I first would like to clear up that the governor has asked us to hold these. The governor asked us to delay the vote until today, until we could address concerns that the public had raised, and that is in fact what we're doing today. So, one of the concerns that we heard very clearly as we were talking with the public over the past few months was the wanting us to ensure that these regulations only affected public schools. As those of you who are on the board know, that the board only has the authority to regulate public schools. And in public schools, we mean traditional public schools, cyber charter, vocational education schools. But to make sure that that is very clear in the revised regulations on page 1, we again state that the board's authority is only for public schools and the chapter is only applicable to the public schools of the Commonwealth. And that is defined in the regulation for those entities that I just mentioned, traditional public schools, charter and cyber, and vocational schools. We also heard great concern, and it was expressed here today, about the intrusion of local control on curriculum, textbooks, and materials. And while this board has always supported local control, we wanted to make sure that we again reinforce the fact that the department shall not, and the board will not, require school entities to utilize a statewide curriculum or statewide reading lists. That is again reaffirming local control of those issues, including instruction, and that's found on page 9 of the regulations. We also heard great concern about Pennsylvania using national assessments. And as you know, there are 2 national consortiums that for other states are developing national tests. And again, we wanted to make sure that the intention of this board was clear, that the board will not include national assessments as part of the state assessment system unless upon consultation with teachers, counselors and parents representing students who have been identified under Chapter 14, that's our special education regulations, the board determines the assessment is an appropriate means of assessing the academic progress of students identified in Chapter under 14, or unless the General Assembly authorizes the use of a national assessment. So we wanted to, again, make sure that Pennsylvania has developed its own assessments, we call them PSSA, and Keystones, which replace the 11th grade. Not more tests, same number of tests, but now given at the end of courses instead of the 11th grade. That we are using state assessments, not national assessments. And you can find those statements on page 42. We also talk about Chapter 14, and we wanted to be very clear that we have another state assessment called the PASI test, which is for the 1% of students, special needs students who are very involved. And parents have told us that they would like a better test to measure those students' abilities, and so that is the only thing we're calling out separately. We're participating with other states and looking at seeing if there's a better way of measuring those with parents' involvement and with Pennsylvania educator involvement. A lot of concern about data mining, and we heard some very disturbing testimony of what other states may be doing or what other organizations may be recommending. But again, we want to be very clear about what Pennsylvania is doing. And to make sure that we are very clear, on page 18 of the regulations, we call out the following. The department shall not expand the collection of student data, and in accordance with FERPA, which relates to family education and privacy rights, shall not collect personal family data due to the implementation of the regulations that are before you. And to make that very clear, we have shown, as folks have stated, what the department and the state currently collects. It is public knowledge. It says exactly what data is collected and why it is collected. And it's for the purposes, in most cases, of identifying when a child is eligible to graduate or additional services and supports that children will need, either through special education or through our vocational education programs. In addition to responding to those concerns, we also have heard at the testimony that we listened to when we were down in Valley Forge just recently about the concern of the transcript and putting on the transcript how a child achieved proficiency in the state standards. And the concern was that we would label children project-based versus test-based in order to identify how they achieved proficiency. And we heard that very clearly, and in reflection on coming back, we did recommend, and the state board in its wisdom has included in the revised regulation, that it doesn't matter how a child has demonstrated proficiency. It matters whether the child has demonstrated proficiency. So therefore, on the transcript will be only the designation of the child's achievement level, not how they gained that. So the concern about labeling a child versus project versus test has been accommodated. We've also heard many concerns and share those concerns about children not being able to receive a diploma because they failed one test. And again, to make sure that the intent of the board and certainly the intent of the department is never to deny a child a diploma. And we think that we've made it very clear in the waiver language that the responsibility for children achieving a diploma rests in the hands of the chief school administrator. We want to make sure that if the child, again, has achieved all the other local graduation requirements, that the child, in fact, is allowed to graduate. The important part there is the fact that when it reaches a critical mass of the schools, that the department and the local school entity work on an improvement plan to look at why a higher rate of not passing either the Keystone or the project-based assessment is occurring. And as you heard Deputy Secretary Perez talk yesterday, these were the very schools that under our supports for Title I schools, et cetera, will have trouble and will be identified, which will cause the department to intercede and help support remedial education, supplementary services, and those types of alignment for the curriculum and instruction to occur. And that is why we call out in the regulations or the superintendent to submit to the department an improvement plan for their students to make sure that in fact the students have had the opportunity to be exposed to more rigorous curriculum, more rigorous instruction to support them, and to find out why that gap is occurring. And I think in our new regulations that we're doing for federal identification, that in fact those support services will now be available to those schools. So as we look at that, I would ask the state board's approval of approving Chapter 4 because of the following. Saying yes to these new regulations is saying yes to the Pennsylvania's enhanced academic standards. Not saying yes goes back to the 2010 Common Core that did not have the benefit of Pennsylvania educators looking at them and adopting and adjusting those. So let's say yes to the Pennsylvania standards and move away from the 2010. Saying yes to these standards is saying yes to staying with Pennsylvania's assessments and is saying no to national tests. So I urge you to vote yes. It says adopting these standards is saying yes to, again, to supporting local control of curriculum and reading lists and reaffirming that curriculum, materials, and instruction are firmly in the hands of local school districts. Saying yes to these regulations is also limiting data collection to what currently is required and not putting additional burdens of intrusion into family information. Saying yes to these, this regulation, again, limits the numbers of tests that the state would have to develop down to 5 and relieves the burden from 10 and fiscally relieves the state from having to develop those. Saying yes to these regulations is extending these regulations to the class of 2017. Saying no makes it operational for the class of 2015, our current juniors, and will in fact enforce a third of the grade, which will affect their GPAs, which we've heard from testimony from many parents that they don't want that to affect their child's GPA. They want their children exposed to higher rigor, but not to affect their GPA. Saying yes to these regulations alleviates the successful school districts from very onerous comprehensive planning mandates. Again, I've heard from many superintendents who are asking, they're doing well, they don't want the expense and the time to develop a comprehensive plan, they're doing well on their own, and saying yes to this will alleviate that expense for school districts. Saying yes to this regulation relieves the schools from the mandates of senior projects for all students and relieves the expense that districts have to spend, which they can use better in supporting project-based assessments that students will now have. Saying yes to these regulations clarifies the waiver process and allows those students who have completed all the local graduation requirements to get a diploma. But saying yes also engages the districts when in fact it reaches a critical mass in improvement planning with support from this Department of Education. And saying yes to this eliminates the identification on the transcripts of how the child has achieved proficiency and only acknowledges whether they've achieved proficiency. So I urge your support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any board members have any questions? Yes, Senator.
If I may. I'm representing the views of the 23 members of the Democratic Caucus. First, let me say that no one opposes the Common Core curriculum. So this notion, and all the testimony we so eloquently heard about Common Core standards is not what the issue is today. The issue for us is a series of questions which we believe the State Board has not answered. And that's why we put in legislative form SB 943, which has been signed by every member of the Democratic Caucus. So let me ask these questions because our wonderful secretary has very skillfully avoided the very questions we want to ask. Let me first say that, say quite bluntly, that what a symbolic week to be debating these issues. As youngsters enter the Philadelphia schools, including 9th graders who will be subject to these exams. There are no teachers in many of the classrooms. We have classrooms now which are increased in size. We have grades where we have 3rd and 4th grade together. We have one guidance counselor per 3,000 students and librarians and nurses going from school to school. That youngster will never repeat that 9th grade. Yet we stand here today saying, we will give you a test for graduation without providing the resources to do so. This administration has not provided the resources for the schools. And their answer is, yes, we'll test everyone and miraculously everyone will do better whether they have any money or not. And Philadelphia is simply the tip of the iceberg, my friends. School after school is on the verge of bankruptcy without the resources to do the mediation. So our question is several-fold. We have asked the department, Madam Secretary, for 2 years, and you've been here during those 2 years, to produce a fiscal note telling us what the cost will be. We don't know what the cost of the impact of these on the school district. You have refused, as has Secretary Tamales, to present that note to us. In the Senate hearing that took place, Senator Fulmer and myself said, Senator Fulmer ran for office and believes, as you know, no unfunded mandates. You have the ability during these last 2 years to have, and this department has had the ability to present to us the fiscal cost. Instead, despite what the IRC has said in asking for those costs, we hear generalities. We hear that somehow, as you just stated again, that the cost of the senior projects will now be enough to take care of the remediation. A social studies teacher leading a senior project may not have any of the skills to give that remediation in math or in science. We need, before we approve these regulations, to understand what the cost is on our local school districts. If every legislator who runs for office said, I'm opposed to unfunded mandates, you understand that the bulk of unfunded mandates do not come through legislation. They come through regulation. And I am uncomfortable, and my caucus is uncomfortable, approving regulations without a clear understanding of their impact on local schools. We've asked you again and again. That was one of the questions you were asked just 2 weeks ago in the Senate hearing. You promised to work with us. We urge you to send this to our independent fiscal office for analysis, and yet you come here today asking us to approve these regulations without working of these last 2 years. And if you made a commitment when you left that meeting to work with us to approve the regulations today without that information, it's doing a disservice in terms of what you and Mr. Wittig had told our committee. We don't oppose Common Core standards. Let me repeat that. We believe in higher standards. But what we do oppose is regulations that increase the expenses on the school districts without an accurate fiscal note. And by the way, one of the things that, you talk about accountability. Part of accountability that we all exercise is to make sure we know the cost. And the business community who supports this would never dream of putting a new program into place without a marketing study, without a study as to the fiscal impact. That's number one, Madam, number one. Second, and these are questions that I'm asking you. The Secretary did a very articulate job of proposing why you should vote yes. My task is simply to raise a series of questions that I don't think we have raised in this body, and yet we're prepared to vote for it. If I may, Molly, you'll have your turn as well. The first question is, do you know the cost? And are you prepared to go back, and do you expect each of us to go back to our legislative district and say, this is what you have no impact on your school. Maybe it will be covered through remediation costs that are already there. Maybe it will be covered by other ways, but we can't tell the schools that. You can't ask us to go back and say this. We look at Philadelphia today. How do those kids possibly pass this test? Are we willing to stamp failure on those youngsters, those teachers, those schools, without asking whether we were accountable for providing the adequate funds for those schools? That's all I'm asking. The second question I would ask you is this. I have asked this department to give us the results of the latest Keystone exams. Every school district has it, by the way. In my area, all the school districts give it to the intermediate units, which have it. The only people who don't have it are the policymakers, us here today and the Senate. Why would I care? Because the failure rate of Keystones and the increases over PSSA 11th grade directly bears on the remediation cost. And if we're going to pass something, we should know the cost. By the way, if Governor Corbett is willing to pay for all the remediation costs for our school, I drop that argument. But there's been no offer by this department or their administration to pay 1 cent more to the schools in terms of those remediation costs. So why are we being denied this? I ask that this be shared. You are voting on something today where you don't even have access to what those test results are. And the most recent test results are where everyone else has that access. Every school administrator. If I look at my superintendent, he can tell me what the schools are, his schools, and he can tell me what every school in Delaware County is as well. And in my information I have to get through the dead of night, so to speak, from people who will share it as the chair of an education committee. You know over 60% of our students failed algebra. What is the remediation cost? You know that only 11% of our students who are non-English speakers pass the English comprehension 11.3. If that's the case, why should we be surprised if youngsters don't know English, they're not passing the English part? This is the type of information that is crucial before you make a decision, and I would hope you would demand that information. Now let me go through this more quickly. The third question I would ask you is: we are told that that we are maintaining standards. Let me repeat for my friends here from A+ School and from Military Readiness. I agree with you entirely. I want to see standards to the very top of the curriculum. What we are asking we do not oppose Common Core. We are questioning the system of coupling, as Dr. Bob Flynn said, coupling Common Core with required graduation exams. When schools don't have the resources, when we don't know the results, we don't know the costs, and the department and the governor refuses to say that they will provide the funding for those costs. This is our lack of accountability to our school districts and to our children. We say we're maintaining these standards. Yeah, it's very interesting. I find out, as a legislature, that the department is talking out of both sides of its mouth. On one hand, it's saying we can't hurt these students, so we're not going to worry if 10% so 10% factor, you don't even have to tell the department if you want to exempt 10% of the students. On the other hand, we say every student needs to be taught to the top of the curriculum, so that what? So that we can have the very things that you guys have asked for. Well, even No Child Left Behind said every student. Now we're saying that 10% can be automatically exempted without the department even knowing. How do we, the real tragedy is this. No Child Left Behind couldn't reach its goal of 100%. So in essence, in our request for an exemption, we basically go back and say, hey, 10% are throwaway kids, in my view is what we're saying. Because if you're allowing 10% through, without a questioning of the department, then what is it that you're going to do on that 10%? And when it's over 10%, you say you want a school improvement plan. What are the regulations of that plan? I'm just telling you how I feel. I don't have to have the board members to agree with me. And I'm saying, fifthly, of the 7 points, you talk about what you're going to do with schools. I'm disappointed, Madam Secretary, that you and the department did not share the Senate hearing and that we had in Chester County. I asked this committee before they vote to ask this question. Why would every single superintendent in Chester and Montgomery County, two of the largest counties in this Commonwealth, oppose the exams as a graduation requirement? All support Common Core. In fact, the superintendent from Delaware County is here representing the 13 superintendents. Joe O'Brien, the IU director of Chester County, told me to state that the superintendents of some of the highest performing schools in this Commonwealth oppose the graduation test. I wish you shared that testimony with everyone. I wish you made reference that that's one of the issues that you would address when you said why to vote yes. Because the issue is education the filling of a pail, or is it the lighting of a fire and a passion for learning? The best school district in this state questioned the metrification of education. Do you remember the facts, or do you remember the passion and what the teacher did to you? And are we stronghold education so that we can't have? All I'm asking you to do is ask yourself, think for a second. School board after school board in Chester and Montgomery County have passed resolutions not opposed to Common Core, because most of them have standards way beyond Common Core, opposed to the coupling of the test, the graduation test, and these districts have nothing to hide. Let me give you an example. For Different East Town School District, you know what the dropout rate in that school last year was? 0. You know what the going on to post-secondary education rate is? 97%. Do you know what the number of National Merit Scholars and people got letters of recommendation was? 62. But that board, along with Radnor and last night, Great Valley School Districts, have all begun a process where you'll see every district soon passing resolutions against coupling the test. Why? Because they're simply telling you as a state board, one size doesn't fit all, and that question has not been addressed. They're saying to you, leave us alone. What on earth do you want us to do? Why do you keep testing us? When we are a model, the only thing you're doing, the state is doing, is taking away from us our ability to educate youngsters to the top of the curriculum. And second of all, and finally, the last 2 points are this. Let's look at some of the low-performing districts in the state. Let's look at, for example, because the superintendents in Delaware County, why they represent and Chester County, some of the best school districts, also represent Chester City, represent the city of Coatesville, do they not? And what's happening here? I think that Dr. Deval Flynn, who's still here, has tried to explain this to you. And this is a concern of our caucus, if you don't provide the resources, not in generality, but in actual, I would love to see this resolution go along with another resolution saying we'll put it into effect if we have the resources. All you're doing for that child in 9th grade in Philadelphia, sitting in that school, is creating a situation where the stamp of failure will be put on that youngster, on that school, and on that community. And as Senator Brewster, who was mayor of McKeesport, explained to the caucus, and explained, I believe, in compensations, must have been Secretary Kamala, because things change so quickly that I have to remember dates, had explained that that the state gives us millions of dollars for economic redevelopment. But once you say the school fails, what you've done is you've ruined any opportunity for us to have economic development. Because no companies are coming to McKeesport. Because people choose where they live based on the school districts and what we have in terms of the school. In conclusion, I'm sorry if I've taken more time than I should. I'm sorry, but I have a real passion on this issue. And I represent a caucus which is deeply concerned about every youngster in Pennsylvania. Whenever you can get 23 members of any caucus to agree on anything, it's pretty miraculous. I think even my House members will agree. And all we're saying to the board today is this. We agree with you. We need Common Core standards. We agree with you. They should be up and high. But we cannot vote to approve these standards until these questions are answered. How much will it cost our districts? You've had 2 years to answer that. We have not. All we wanted was a fiscal note. The department has to provide us with a real fiscal note. Molly, when you speak, if you can present to me the fiscal note today, I'll withdraw everything that I said. But the point is, can a board suggest to the legislature a regulation which has been estimated to cost over $300 million on our local districts, and a department which, instead of providing a fiscal note, just says everything's covered? All we want is that. It's fair, isn't it, to ask the board to vote once they receive that? Second, are you going to vote today without even knowing the results of the last exams? Everyone else has them. But we have to wait until after this meeting, until all the I's and T's on delivery are achieved, where any school board member any school board can simply get on the computer and knows the results of algebra, English, and biology here without it hasn't been totally all the I's and T's dotted, but the general thrust is clearly there. Are you going to ask why 25 superintendents in 2 of the largest counties are opposed to this? The one who spoke here today. Are you going to ask why school district after school district in our area are passing resolutions in opposition to this? Are you going to ask, finally, are you going to ask, what impact does this have on that 9th grade student in Philadelphia, who, when we argue among politicians,
Senator, can we get
I'm going to get to the point, Mr. Whittaker, and I'll end it.
Okay.
Mr. Whittaker, if I may say in all candor, I respect you, but you and the Secretary have not fulfilled, in my judgment, all right, without us getting angry, have not fulfilled your obligation to the Senate Education Committee by providing us with a fiscal note. You have refused to do that for 2 years. You've also stonewalled. Over the last 3 months, Secretary Demarest has been involved directly in that stonewalling, the information as to these test exams. You won't give it to us. Then hand it over today, the test exam, Secretary Demarest or Acting Secretary Demarest, hand us over that fiscal note. When you left the meeting, we pledged to work with you, but we assumed, I at least assumed, that you would not bring this up to a vote until we had that knowledge. If you meant something else.
I'd like to answer that if you'd let me.
Secretary, I'd be delighted to let you.
I think there's a difference between your determination that I have refused to give you a fiscal note and your resistance to accepting the data that we've given you.
What data have you given us physically?
We have given a fiscal note in the beginning.
And what was that fiscal note? Can you define it?
Go back and take a look at the regulation when we put it into place that said, in fact, the board had given a long runway so that the investment of $27 billion that goes into public education could be used to adjust curriculum, used to adjust instruction, and buy materials. That was why the long runway was given. You refuse to acknowledge that there are monies that the state has given, and over $7 billion in public education, because none of that matters to you.
It matters a great deal, Mr. Secretary, but you tell me, in terms of equity of every student, my districts can afford it. But you tell me how Reading and Harrisburg and York and Philadelphia that are on the verge of bankruptcy have the resources there to do it. And how when 1/3 of our school districts no longer have summer school, 1/3 of our schools, 51% of our school districts have increased size. They're not in places such as mine. They're in the poorest communities. And my belief is until you show us in writing with numbers how the poorest communities are going to be helped, you're passing a program that the governor wants that will result in putting the stamp of failure on increasing numbers of young people in this Commonwealth. Again, I don't oppose Common Core standards, but you have to explain how that 9th grade student in Philadelphia, in a class of 34, 40 kids, in a classroom where 3rd and 4th grade may well be combined, with no librarian, no school nurse, and a guidance counselor having 3,000 to 1 ratio, that kid has a chance. And you have to tell me what the department, where it is in the budget that will assist that school and that child in Philadelphia and Harrisburg and York. So I'm finished, Mr.
Senator, please allow one of the members.
Absolutely.
Senator Newman, I respect you greatly, and I know that you really have a lot of passion for education. But I recall a meeting when Mr. Costello was chair.
Absolutely.
And you and Senator Costello voted yes to the test with a price tag of $220 million.
Correct.
Okay. Now, I haven't seen you probably since then. But now, we are the devil incarnate.
You're not the devil incarnate.
I am voting to support Chapter 4 changes.
And it does the test.
Because I trust the acting secretary.
God bless you.
Okay. Well, you have an opinion, and I certainly.
And I respect you, Molly, and your opinion. You're a wonderful advocate for education.
Yes, I am, because
always have been.
care.
You do indeed, and I care as well. And so we have 2 caring people at different points of view.
Right, but was that the knitting lion?
Nobody interrupted you.
Yes, sir.
We are at a point now where we have to stop being so schizophrenic about what we're going to do with our kids. We've got to get down to the kids and down to the teachers, and we have to give them something that they can go with and stop flip-flopping and stop acting like it's the governor's problem. I just think it's time we all be cool and calm and take a look. There have been many changes to Chapter 4 since you went to the governor and had it stopped. I think that those changes speak highly to what this department has done to make it palatable. Now, will we run into problems where there could be other situations? Perhaps. I believe that under Carolyn's direction, Secretary's direction, that it will be, I have seen her work with public, I have seen her work with schools, I have seen her work with each individual board member, I have seen her invite people in the audience to come and speak. And I think that this could possibly work if we stop being out of our heads. So I just wanted, I remember the votes. And I didn't vote against with it that time. I voted against it. But it's life. It's what's going to be. So thank you.
And,
Thank you. Any other comments, or Representative Orban?
I really hadn't planned to say anything this morning, and I do support Common Core, and I basically supported this resolution. But you know, my school district has been referred to over and over again in this discussion. Let me just say a couple of things about that, because it concerns me. It concerns me because my school district is in the chaos that it's in because of lack of state funding.
Correct.
My district is in the place it's in because the governor sits on $45 million appropriated to that district for some issue that has nothing to do with school funding.
Amen.
My district sits where it is, and we have the finest high school in the state, public-private, in Masterman, the finest high school in the state. I went to Central, which is probably almost as good as Masterman. The alumni at Central spent $5 million. The alumni, not the state, the alumni put $5 million into a library for that school. That library today sits shuttered because we don't have a librarian. That's an absolute disgrace. That's unconscionable. So how are we sitting here talking about this policy, which the kids in my district won't be able to meet unless we put pressure on the Department of Education, the governor, to do what they're supposed to do? How can we sit here? How can we sit here and do that? I'm impassioned, yes. I'm angry because We have a situation where we have chaos because of this Board of Education, because of this Board of Education, this administration, this governor. It's disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. We all ought to be ashamed of this. We all ought to be ashamed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm a little confused as to the funding issue with regard to this board and how the board gets involved with funding. I don't know how you...
How can the board of the State Board of Education not be concerned about inadequate funding of a district, the largest district in this state? How can we not be concerned?
We are concerned, of course.
How can we not be? Why are we not today up at the governor's office saying you need to release the money that was appropriated, not sitting here debating this issue? That's why I'm angry. What are you doing to help a district that is the largest district in the state that has been underfunded, where even money that's appropriated doesn't get to them?
Well, as it, and I'm going to get to you, Senator. We've covered a lot of anecdotal things this morning, and if you'll indulge me, an anecdotal example of my school district, which I sit on the board for the last 18 years. And it's a small, rural, poor district as well. And we have no problem assimilating to or adopting the core or the testing going on with it. And I've asked Senator Dinniman has heard this in my testimony before. We've gone along. I've asked the business manager to give us a number for implementation over and above what we would normally spend for remediation, over and above what we would normally spend for in-service, for teacher prep, for curriculum development. And her number was $30,000 for Tamaqua, whose budget is $27 million. Now, I don't know where these millions and millions of dollars come from. It's totally contingent on the remediation, I understand that. But if a district has been doing, and remember, 2017 is a drop-dead date. That's down the road. Like the Secretary said, it's a long runway. And I firmly believe, as a member of the local school board, that this is not going to impact us greatly from a fiscal perspective. Representative Clymer, I believe you had a comment. Okay.
Thank you very much. And just a few thoughts. There was a recent news article in one of the local papers, and to my good friend Chairman Roebuck, that the problems in Philadelphia just didn't start recently. They started back in 1987. They were already showing through the Auditor General that there were problems that were taking place financially, but nothing was done. There was more chaos, and you can't put the problems on the Philadelphia School District on Governor Rendell or on the Secretary of Education. You just cannot do that. And if I had the time, I'm not going to go into it right now because I know we're all looking at ways that we had this the adoption of the regulations take place. But there was a brilliant educator, and she was the chancellor of the Washington, D.C. School District by the name of Michelle Ray. She was outstanding. She took that situation that was so depressed, and she has written a book called Radical. I suggest that every member read it. She took this school district that was so depressed and had so low scores with the resources that they had and made it into one of the highest test scores of students in the nation. Unfortunately, politics played a role, and she had to leave her job. And if you know the story, it was on Fox TV. They showed her outstanding credentials as chancellor of this depressed area, and how the concept that she used was, we need great teachers. That was the story. We need great teachers. We need great administrators. We need to create an environment, and the children, regardless of the situation that they're in, will respond. That was the promise of hope that she shared. And through her inspiration, other teachers began to get the vision. And those teachers that could not adopt or did not want to find time for the students, they left. I mean, she moved them out because she wanted the best teachers for those students, and she got them. And her record is an enviable record. I will end with this. The hour's late. The status quo is unacceptable. The students look for the Pennsylvania core standards to be adopted, and our nation's welfare depends upon it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Clymer. Sandra, do you have a final comment?
No,
It's
Stan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple of comments, and I'm very much of a divided mind on this issue. I fully support, I understand, and I believe that there's a serious need to adjust what we have as expectations for our children. This idea of standards, this idea of creating standards that fit for the 21st century. Things do change. Things have changed. What children have to get out of education now is very different than what they had to get 20 years ago, 10 years ago, definitely 40 years ago when I was in school. And we need to change with that. The standards, though, are just a piece of the puzzle, because what goes behind our children reaching the standards is what we're doing differently in these schools to enable them. How schools are arranged, how they're supported, what the capacity of the teachers are, how they're prepared, what the supports are. We talked about counselors yesterday. The standards don't sit alone. The problem that I'm struggling with is fully support standards don't even mind that at the end of the day that a diploma should mean something. That we should expect children when they graduate from school to have a series of proficiencies that can be measured. Makes perfect sense to me. The problem that I have, though, is given those outcomes, we aren't providing the inputs that best allow our children to reach them. And I don't think, and I appreciate Representative Roebuck's passion, I understand it. I am born and raised in Philadelphia and went through the public schools there. The problem started before 1987, very respectfully, Representative Clymer. Money does matter. How money spent matters. The commitment of the individual spending the money matters. It all does. What, though, we have today, and the problem that I'm having, if we could uncouple the issue of standards from the implementation schedule for the Keystone exams, I think I could fully support and vote in the affirmative for the Chapter 4 regulations. The problem that I have is that we're talking about implementing a schedule of exams that are going to require children to know more, be able to demonstrate more, but what they have to support them, as I've seen in the last 4 or 5 years in the area I'm most familiar with, which is my home district, has declined and decreased. And I can't in good conscience do that. They don't even have the level of support they had 4 years ago for literacy coaches, or math coaches. This year, we have eliminated in most of our high schools the 9th grade academies that help children get acclimated to high school. We've totally eliminated honors programs at most of our high schools and AP classes. So the options that we're laying out in these standards aren't available to that group. And that's only one district that I'm familiar with. I can't speak to the other 499 districts across this Commonwealth. But I really question the commitment of not this body, but of many other stakeholders to provide the capacity to help school districts and schools develop the capacity, the instruction, the courses, the remediation, the supports that will give each child an equal chance to reach the outcomes that we hold before them. And if we are not able to do that, if we cannot demonstrate that, and again, I think it can be measured by budgetary priorities, then I don't think I can support, I will not vote in support of the adoption of the Chapter 4 as it exists. If this body can talk through, again, decoupling adoption of standards from the implementation schedule of the Keystone exams, then I would be happy to consider that, Mr. Chairman, and figure out how we could allow the Commonwealth to move forward in raising our standards, but at the same time, not hold our children hostage and not penalize them until we're ready to commit and invest in their ability to reach those standards.
Thank you, Sandra. That was very articulate. I have one comment, and you kind of gave us a charge of what are we doing. And I'm going to throw it back in the legislature and the Senate. And from a school board perspective, I'm taking my hat off as chair of the state board. There is one line item that you all can fix, the pensions. The pensions. You cannot live with 29% contribution pensions. You guys know that, and it's the elephant in the room. And come 2017, 500 school districts are going to be bankrupt. So it's in your lap. You can fix it. That's what has to happen. We can live with 10% contribution, even 16. But 21, 26, 29, not going to happen. So that's my sermon. We are going to move on to a, yes, sir.
Just one point if I can clarify as well on the date about the problems in Philadelphia. The reality is also that since 2000, about that point, the schools of Philadelphia have been under the control of the state through the SRC. The governor appoints the majority of the members of the board that runs the Philadelphia school system. So that is where it goes back to. The SRC, the state, that's where it goes back to.
Thank you. Kirk.
Yes, and I'd like to, I really feel what you're saying, Sandra, and I'm been divided with this myself. And but I'm fortunate enough to, in my work, to be very familiar with a number of the students that you and Senator Denton are talking about are sitting in 9th grade right now that we feel like we're damning. But I know under this current system, and I'm a bit altruistic, which is not always a good way to be. But I'm going to be altruistic in my vote on this particular circumstances because I know right now those 9th grade students are sitting there will probably get a diploma under the old system that's no good. And that's what I have a problem with. It's not letting the student get a diploma. It's giving the student a diploma that doesn't matter. We heard statistics, and I suspect they're valid statistics about how unprepared students are. And I know that, well, I've seen the faces, I've seen of students who pass and get a diploma out of public school in the city of Harrisburg who think they really have achieved something. And nothing like finding out you haven't. Nothing like thinking you put in 4 years of hard work, you did everything you were supposed to do, you didn't do what all those other kids did, and you don't have enough knowledge to take an entry-level Harrisburg Area Community College course. That, to me, is criminal. Now, I'd like to think, and I know, and I'm going to give a stamp of approval for Carolyn. I don't know if she's the Wicked Witch of the West, Senator Denman, that you portray her to be.
I don't portray her.
Don't interrupt me, please. This is not about that. But I do know if she is, and I hope, from what I know about her today, that she is the Secretary of Education. Because I've seen her in action with people, and she's not like anybody else I know who's in that type of position. And this isn't a Carolyn. I don't even know Carolyn that well, but I appreciate what she does. She's doing for that student in 9th grade today. Because I like to think that based on what's going to happen with the Keystones, however they happen, or and the Common Core, that what is really happening to that student is going to be outed. That student does not have the basic knowledge they need to be successful in the world, in your world, my world. And that somewhere along the line, in that process, the Department of Education and some governor from somewhere, whoever it is, and the legislatures, which is you guys, are going to figure out, yeah, that kid does need extra resources. So let's put the resources where they're needed. Because I know up to this point, there's been millions and millions of dollars of resources put into that 9th grader, and she and he are still not getting a valid diploma. And I've seen where lots of people in the schools are having valid and very good jobs. And I'm not putting any of that down. But that student is damned anyway. So that's where I'm voting on this, Sandra. You and I haven't talked about this. But I don't, this is, personally, I don't want you to think that I, or maybe anybody here, is not thinking about that particular child. It's just how you particularly want to think about that child. bottom line is, I hope that we find out that that child, not I hope, at worst, we find out that child does not really have what they need to get a diploma, and then we do the resource thing behind it. And I know, and I think that the districts, this will put districts in those situations in a point that now they really have to do something about this. And not just put up an SES program within their building where kids are just running around and nobody's really getting any SES services, but everybody's getting paid. I'd like to think that now this will put a situation where the district, I'm the superintendent of the district, I'm thinking, you know what, this can't go on. I really have to make sure this kid is getting. It's going to be a long process, even if it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but I think ultimately will benefit that kid who is in ninth grade, who is traumatized, And what more can we do for a traumatized kid than give them an education? Nothing practically speaking. And we're not doing it right now. And this is the best vehicle I can see to get it done.
Thank you, Kirk. Magnificent as always. I'm going to call for the motion.
I just want to compliment Kirk, if I may, Mr. Chair. Kirk, you've come to see me before, and I know your passion on this. And I just want to say, this is not good guys versus bad guys. This is, we all accept the fact that there is a crisis in education. It's just that each of us, very passionately, whether it's myself, whether it's Stanley, whether it's Representative Robach, whether it's yourself, have a different view on it, of how we can achieve the same goal. But I want to assure you, Kirk, that, and you know from our discussions, that our goal is the same, and you've done magnificent things within it. Molly has worked as hard as she can on this board. I don't know Ed at all, but I presume the same Ed. And anything we say is not meant to be disrespectful. It's just that each of us cares so much that our passion comes to the front. And I think what we're trying to say, we never insulted Carolyn. It was simply that certain commitments we thought, you could argue that back and forth, you know that. And so no insult, I apologize if it was any way insulting. But the point is that all we're trying to say, and Jim and I and Sandy and others, is this vote means everything to a lot of kids. And we just are looking at it differently. But all of us have the kid, have the youngster. Can I ask one question or point of order, Mr. Chair? Is it possible from the floor that a resolution be made to separate the, as was suggested by Duncan, Glenn, Sandra, to separate the Common Core from the implementation of the Keystone exams, or are they so intertwined that that's impossible to do?
That was a no, I think. I think what we'll do is entertain the motion and go through the voting process first, and then we will, we may talk about it later. Judge Green, could you please offer the motion? I want everybody to listen to this carefully.
Before I do, may I say a few words? I want to thank, first of all, the members of the audience for what you've done today and yesterday in bringing your concerns to us and also bringing your insights and allowing us to focus on what the issues are and to explain what the issues are not. It's been an amazing 24 hours, and I thank you. We have read lots and lots of paper. Most of this is dealing with this chapter 4. Assessments are not and have never been intended to be a gatekeeper to success. I think that is a universally held belief here. Assessments cannot and should not be gatekeepers to success. What we're trying to do here is use our best efforts to prepare our students, our Pennsylvania students, to be able to go into this 21st century well-equipped. Whether it be post-secondary education or whether it be the workplace, that they have the skills, the talents to participate. We believe that Pennsylvania is highly capable of developing our own standards and assessment tools for our students. We also believe the citizens of Pennsylvania want our department to develop those standards and those tools. Said another way, we believe that generally speaking, we should not participate, with some of the exceptions that were set up by our acting secretary, that we should not participate in national assessment standards or assessment tools, sometimes called the Common Core, and that's where some of the confusion is. That have been promoted by PARC, P-A-R-C-C, and the Smarter Balanced Consortiums. So, with that, I'd like to make a motion. I move that the State Board of Education adopt Chapter 4 as amended as a final form regulation and authorize board staff to revise the regulation as necessary to conform with regulatory requirements. And in doing so, to rescind the action of the State Board of Education in 2010 that adopted what we are calling National Common Core standards.
The motion on the floor, there's a second by Dr. Michaelini. Roll call vote. Steph? Oh, I'm sorry. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, roll call.
I'm going to start with basic ed and go around this way. And then I'll get to the people on the phone. Mr. Sheehan?
Yes.
Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Hallett?
Yes.
Dr. Sheehan?
Yes. Yes.
Honorable Lolly Green?
Yes.
Representative Roebuck?
No.
Representative Fulmer? Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Fulmer, I apologize.
He has a medical appointment. Unable to be medical situation.
Dr. Barker?
Yes.
Ms. Farmer White?
Karen? Oh, we have a proxy. Ms. White is in the affirmative. Do you have a proxy?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm here, yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Ms. Davis?
Connie, are you there? Okay. We also have a proxy for Ms. Davis in the affirmative.
Dr. Michaelini?
Yes.
Mr. Agris?
Yes.
Jonathan Perry?
Jonathan had to leave the phone, but we have a proxy for Jonathan Perry in the affirmative.
Ms. Beetlestone? No. Ms. Dungy Glenn?
No.
Senator Dinniman?
No.
Representative Clymer?
Yes.
And Mr. Whitting?
Yes.
We congratulate those who have succeeded in the vote. It's a democracy, and that's how it works. But Mr. Whitaker?
13 yes, 4 no, the yeses prevail. We will now move on to...
I have a point of order question for you.
Yes, sir.
When you denied the ability to make that motion, you knew that you can not only amend a bill, there's no way to amend it now. And so in essence, we will not be able to have that discussion of the decoupling. In terms of a vote, there's several people indicated they might even be willing to vote yes if it was decoupled, 50 exams. And so I wondered how you came to that parliamentary decision?
Well, had it failed, then we could have sought other remedies, perhaps.
So the only
that,
other...
That was germane to the discussion prior. And people could have voted in the affirmative or the negative based on the discussion prior. And that was all aired out, and you've had actually 45 minutes.
I appreciate that, Mr. Ware. I was just asking the parliamentary question, not criticizing.
Thank you.
But it is possible, if I may ask you one other parliamentary question, if the 4 people who voted no wish to present a motion at a future meeting to decouple, we do have that, is that parliamentary possible?
Anyone can make a motion from the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, it's not, Larry, it's not being on yet, just wanted to know.
That's okay, I'm just trying to get out of here before midnight.
Mr. Chairman, I actually want to clarify something with Senator Dimon. I think we're trying to
Right.
I'm a little unclear as to what rules of order we are operating on in this part. Is it the Robert Rules of Order, or is it some other kinds of planning rules?
It's Robert's Rules of Order.
So I was secretary to the School Reform Commission for many years, and I had a fairly strong grasp on the Robert Rules of Order. And as I understand it, and I may be wrong, when a motion is put on the table, if there is a request that there be an amendment, the motion gets on the table, then the person who wants to amend it is allowed to amend it. There's then discussion on that amendment, and either there's a vote, a yes or no vote on whether to move ahead with that amendment. If the vote is no, you then go back to the original motion. If the vote is yes, you then have discussion about that amendment, and then vote on the amendment. So I do worry a little bit about process. You know, I'm a very process-based person, and I am a ne concerned that the process adopted here today did not follow the proper rules.
Duly noted. Okay, you make the motion for Porter Township.
Yes, this is a motion on the application of the Porter Township Initiative Independent School District. I move that the State Board of Education deny the application of the Porter Township Initiative Independent School District seeking transfer from the East Stroudsburg Area School District to the Waltham-Hallback Area School District.
There's a motion to be made. Is there a second? Second. Any questions? Under the question, I want to reiterate my. I took things a little differently from the hearing. I'm not going to go through point for point what I saw. The tax implication, clearly the people that were at the meeting were more concerned about their taxes than they were about the educational aspect of things. But for me, it boils down to one thing, that if given the same circumstance and having children in one district or the other, that I believe everybody here, and again, this is my opinion, would choose to send their child to Waltham-Hallback because of it's a smaller district, it's geographically more situated, and the parents, it's their choice. And I'm a big choice guy, and I feel that we should grant the application to move on based on that information. And I don't think that the children of Porter Township should be penalized for lousy representation, which certainly the East Stroudsburg had much better representation at the hearings than the Porter Township. But my opinion, personal opinion, would be to grant them the annexation as opposed to denying it, as the committee has stated. That's just my opinion. Any other comments?
Yes, I have a concern, and I thank Wendy for giving me some idea about what the standards, appropriate standards were here, and what our standards and scope of review are here. In one hand, we're a de facto fact finder, which is kind of unusual for this level. On the other hand, we have to defer to what Corpcom Police said on financial matters. And I think it would really, and I'm not at ease with the process, nothing to do with what you did at all. I'm just not at ease with the information that was available to both sides as to what they had to produce and the quality of the evidence that had to be produced. I don't know one way or the other. I mean, after reading everything, I think you did a fine job on the report. I'm talking about the litigants here. And I think we should give some attention to that process, that procedure, so that there's a clarity for the litigants as to what they have to produce and in what level they have to produce it, experts, whatever, for whatever the issue is. In situations like this, and like you said, an earlier one, there was no one who really disagreed, so it wasn't much of a concern, but on this, I think that issue does arise.
Judge, I really appreciate your comments, and I think that having read the record, all the court pleadings in the record, clearly the parties understood very, very well what they were supposed to do. I do, however, agree that the process itself, the statute which sets out the process, is not the best written statute. And quite apart from the issues that you raised, it also leads to a very lengthy process. So this process, I think it was 7 years. So these folks have been going through it for 7 years. It's a very small community. They're all deeply engaged, and the passions become stronger as the time goes on. So I do think that there may be room for the legislatures to take a look at that act, particularly to make sure that, as you say, the standard is clearer and also the process is sped up so that folks in communities who want to do this can, in a very speedy time, 1 to 2 years, really get the answer to the question that is often the most burning question in their community.
I would agree, and then that would also play into what we do, our role in all of this.
Right, and that said, I don't think that changes the decision today. I think that everybody
Right, and just for the record, I'd just like a clarification. I'm a newer person to this board, and so that would be helpful.
Any other comment on your question? If not, roll call vote. Oh, voice vote, I'm sorry. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We have the ayes there and an unopposed. One. So the ayes have it. Any announcements for the good of the order? Maureen? Yeah, I didn't adjourn the meeting yet. Oh, I'm sorry. You do have to teach. You just have one more action item.
I guess that's good. They're just gonna.